Hello and welcome. I'm Seth Boustead, and I'm the lecturer for the Grant Park Music Festival's 2021 season. And I'm going to be talking about a concert now that will be taking place on Friday, July 23rd, and Saturday, July 24th. So, two opportunities to see this great concert. The concert opens up with a Chicago premiere. This is a work called Blow, Fly, Pop by composer Texu Kim. And then we move to Shostakovich's first piano concerto, which is really a concerto for piano and trumpet. And we close out with the great Dvorak Symphony from the New World. Composer Texu Kim is a friend of mine, and it was fun to catch up with him and talk about this piece, the provocatively named Blow, Fly, Pop. Here. Hey, Texu, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Jess?
Doing really well. Thanks for talking to me for this lecture. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Can you talk about the piece that the Grant Park Music Festival will be performing?
The title of the piece is Blow, Fly, Pop with two exclamation points. Um, it's about bubble blowing. I am one of the things I'm into is um, music that is inspired by play, like a children's play or something very simple and everyday life inspired. And this is bubble blowing. So blow is, blowing part, and then the bubble flies, and then the bubble pops. Basically, the life of bubbles. And I translated how it looks and feels to music, and I used some actual toys as a visual element.
Oh, nice. So, I mean, it sounds like the structure of the piece is kind of being generated by, like you said, the life cycle of a bubble. I mean, you feel it expanding, 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 pop, and then it starts over again. Is that kind of how the piece works?
Um, Similar. It definitely begins with the blowing part. So lots of performers will have actually small transparent cup with water in it, and then they will actually blow water, blow with the straws into it, so that that is a visual part, but also people can hear the sound because a lot of people doing it. So like a warbly sound, and then from there the music emerges. And then lots of like flashy passages coming in later, basically showing the fly part, and at the same time, um, there is this plastic poster that a lot of East Asian countries use as pencil board. They're like posters, but they're just like this, just a small cover or something. And then when they just do this, it sounds like,
Mm.
and then that usually that's used as pen in the classroom usually when students get like too warm. So that's how I got the idea of associating that with a flying part, because it's kind of pen, and then if you're just penning the bubble, bubble, you can direct the bubble in a way. So and then with that, orchestra does lots of like warbly sound and also like lots of flashy sounds, as if you can imagine like the bubbles whirling around you. That was my imagination. And then of course, at some point there are lots of bubbles, so it doesn't have to be just a blow, fly, pop. And it's going, blowing, flying, and popping at the same time. So the pop parts would be produced by actually popping sounds of balloons, and then balloons look like a giant bubble, basically.
I love it. I love it. We first met in Missouri. You had written a piece for Alarm Will Sound, and it was inspired by basketballs bouncing, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
Right.
that's
So that, I
correct.
mean, that's also a form of play. I mean, so you say that's really an important part of your compositional style. I mean, when you get these ideas, are you kind of, walking around and you see somebody engaging in an activity like that and you think, oh, that's a great idea for a piece? Is that kind of how it starts usually?
Yeah, but that means there are just too many inspiration, because basically your life is full of inspiration because you see anything that could be music. So I actually the selection and then thinking about what the meaning is exactly, like what the basketball could mean to lots of people, and then how is it related to other things. it's the same with the bubbles because it's a children's play. It comes with some sort of nostalgic idea, and then also the visual element of reflecting light. So it should be something bright, right? So all those meditation on all those plays takes more time.
That's great. Well, I'll be there on July 24th, and I look forward to hearing your piece and to seeing you there.
Yeah, looking forward to being there with the audience, and it would be a great honor for me to be there as well.
That's part of my conversation with Texu Kim, talking about this piece, all the special effects that he uses. And I would normally play an excerpt, but I'm very happy to have a video. I can play part of a video. This is the Korean Symphony Orchestra performing Texu Kim's Blowfly Pop. And thanks to Texu for providing this for me for this lecture. So let's see now those techniques that Texu is talking about. That's an excerpt of Blowfly Pop, the Korean Symphony Orchestra performing. We'll hear that on July 23rd and 24th with the Grant Park Music Festival Orchestra under guest conductor Eun-sun Kim. And it's a fun piece. I've known Texu for years. He is consistently imaginative, highly musical, wonderful composer. It's a great way to open the concert. The second piece on the program is the First Piano Concerto by Dmitri Shostakovich. And I said that this is really a concerto for trumpet and piano, which is true. The trumpet has a solo role that's equally important to the piano, which is kind of an interesting decision by Shostakovich, but he called it his first piano concerto. And it's for strings as well, not the full orchestra. So kind of an interesting instrumentation decision by Shostakovich. This is written in 1934. This is a very youthful Shostakovich. So if you know Shostakovich of the late string quartets, Symphony 5 on, really, it's a much heavier Shostakovich after he's been living for years under the rule of Stalin, under censorship, under the threat of persecution. This is before a lot of that. This is Shostakovich really showing off his prowess as a pianist. He wrote this concerto for himself to play, and very much as a composer, too. In fact, at the time, he probably was better known as a pianist, and most people probably thought that he was going to go into a career as a pianist, but he was equally eager to showcase his talents as a composer, and he sure does in this piece. At the time, in the early 30s, Shostakovich was a silent film accompanist. And so the concerto actually, a lot of people said that you can hear the influence of Charlie Chaplin movies. You can hear there's a kind of manic, people said even circus music kind of atmosphere in the piece that people did not like. I like it quite a bit. I think it's a lot of fun. Let's listen to a little bit of the first movement. And I'm going to skip the intro and go right up to when the piano comes in. That's a little bit of the first movement of the Shostakovich First Piano Concerto. Remember, this is written for himself to play. He's a very, very confident pianist, composer. This is vintage Shostakovich in some respects. It may not be dark Shostakovich from the Stalin years, but nonetheless, the angular rhythms, the switch on a dime from one theme to another, and this kind of manic energy, all of that we see in Shostakovich throughout his career. It just gradually gets darker and darker to a certain extent as that career unfolds in the shadow of Stalinism, unfortunately. But here we have this wonderful, youthful Shostakovich. It's a lot of fun. I do want to play a part of the piece where the trumpet and piano have what I consider to be a particularly sensitive interplay, and that's in the second movement. So let's jump in about 4 minutes into the second movement. That's a little bit of the second movement of the Shostakovich First Piano Concerto. I love this. It's very beautiful, very sensitive music. Again, here Shostakovich is writing a slow melody, a beautiful theme. We're just missing a lot of the heaviness that comes later in Shostakovich. He's optimistic, looking forward to the future, a bright career as a pianist, a bright career as a composer. And of course, today he is one of the great Russian composers, one of the great composers of all time. The concert will conclude with the great Symphony by Dvorak, his undisputed masterwork from the New World. And this is a huge work, so what I want to try to do to help you make some sense of it is tell an interesting story about the piece. Dvorak wrote this in America, as you would expect, from a symphony subtitled From the New World. He came to America, to New York City specifically, at the invitation of Jeanette Thurber, who is a fascinating woman. She ran the American Conservatory of Music in New York, now a defunct organization. But she insisted on opening the doors to women, to people of color, to everyone at a time when nobody was doing that. So she was a pretty fascinating person in many respects, and she was looking around at the composers around her, the American composers around her, who were desperately trying to find an American sound. And interestingly, Thurber's solution was to bring in a European. She wanted Sibelius, but he wouldn't come. She got Dvorak, and that turned out to be an historic decision. While Dvorak was here, he taught Henry T. Burleigh, who was a gifted composer and singer and compiler of spirituals. And Burleigh introduced Dvorak to the African-American spiritual, and Dvorak was smitten. And what he did is, well, first of all, he told American composers that this is a wealth of material that you should absolutely be harnessing and using. This is the American sound that you're looking for. And then secondly, he contributed back. He wrote the main theme to the second movement, the Largo, the famous Largo from the Symphony. And this was put to words 30 years later, Going Home, and has become spiritual in its own right. It's been embraced by the African-American community. It's often sung at funerals. And it's this fascinating melody because when you hear it, you think it's something you've always known, but it's actually an original melody by Dvorak. So let's listen to the second movement. I'm going to play a little bit of the beginning. Well, I'm going to skip the intro again, go right to this opening, to this melody in the oboe, and then I'm going to move ahead a little bit, and there's this wonderful sequence where the melody from the first movement comes back, so I don't need to play the first movement because you'll hear it here, and then things calm down and we hear this Largo melody, Going Home, in the horns. That's part of the second movement of Symphony from the New World by Antonin Dvorak. We heard that beautiful melody in the oboe, now known as Going Home as well. And then I jumped up towards the end when it comes back in the horn. Prior to that, there's a statement of the opening theme from the first movement that will come back in the fourth movement. In fact, Dvorak uses and reuses the themes throughout all four movements of the symphony. The third movement is a scherzo. I'm not going to play it though because the symphony is huge. I could spend 20 minutes talking about it easily. So I want to jump over to the finale and I'm going to play the opening so you hear the theme from the fourth movement. And then I'm going to jump all the way to the end of the movement where Dvorak does something that's almost miraculous in my opinion. And that is to tie all of these melodies together. We're going to hear first the Largo theme, then we're going to hear the melody from the first movement overlaid over the melody from the fourth movement. It's a wonderful, wonderful moment in the symphony. It's a great way to tie it all together in a very satisfying conclusion. That's the finale of Symphony from the New World by Antonin Dvorak. Amazing what he does in a minute and a half to be able to tie everything up so neatly. Really satisfying conclusion. And the symphony itself is a kind of miracle in that it has become a staple of the classical repertoire while also becoming a staple of hymn tunes and spirituals with that wonderful melody, Going Home. That piece will close out this concert by the Grant Park Music Festival on July 23rd and 24th. I'm Seth Boustead. Thanks so much for listening to my lecture and hope to see you at a future talk.